Found out my girlfriend let her ex move into our apartment without asking, so I moved myself out, called the leasing office, loaded a rental truck, signed the release, and watched a compliance email. A higher deposit, late rent, and voluntary termination end the apartment and their relationship. WZ Tales is back with another story. This one is about a man whose girlfriend moved her ex into their shared apartment without asking, so he quietly moved himself out and let reality handle the rest. See if you think he waited too long to act. I'm Daniel. I'm 30, and I work as a logistics coordinator for a regional distribution company. My job is steady, structured, and predictable, which suits me just fine. I pay my bills on time. I track my expenses. I like knowing where things stand. What I do not like is chaos creeping into my home and pretending it belongs there. My girlfriend Tara was almost the opposite of me in a lot of ways. She was 27, worked in event marketing, and had a personality people usually described as strong. That was the polite version. She was confident, loud, persuasive, and very used to getting her way. When we first got together, I thought it was ambition. Over time, I started to see it more clearly. It was less about confidence and more about control. We had been together a little over 2 years and living together for 14 months in a downtown apartment. Both our names were on the lease. Rent was high but manageable because we split everything down the middle, 50-50. At least that was the agreement. Her ex, Ryan, had always been somewhere in the background, not physically around all the time, but present enough that his name came up more than I liked. According to Tara, he was immature, emotionally stunted, and unable to handle her. That was her version. Still, she brought him up often, mostly as proof of how much she had grown. About a month before everything fell apart, Tara started mentioning that Ryan was having a hard time. First it was that he had tension with his roommate. Then it was that the roommate had kicked him out. Then it was that he was bouncing between couches for a while. I listened, nodded, and kept moving. It was not my problem, and I did not think she would make it mine. Then Tuesday happened. I got home from work and found Tara sitting at the kitchen counter with her laptop open and that expression she always had when she had already made a decision for both of us. "We need to talk," she said. I thought maybe money, maybe work stress, maybe something normal. Instead, she said, "Ryan's moving in. There's no discussion. It's temporary, so don't start." At first I laughed because I thought it had to be a joke. It was too absurd to be real. But Tara was not smiling. She explained that Ryan would take the spare room for a couple of weeks. She said any decent person would help someone in crisis. She said I needed to be mature about it. The more she talked, the clearer it got that this was not a conversation. She was not asking. She was informing. I asked when this had been decided. She said earlier that day. I asked why I had not been consulted. She rolled her eyes and said, "Because you'd make it dramatic." That line told me everything. If your partner avoids talking to you because your opinion might interfere with what they want, the problem is not your reaction. The problem is they already decided your input does not matter. I remember standing there, still in my work clothes, keys in my hand, looking at the woman I lived with and realizing I had already been written out of the decision. So I said very calmly, "If he's moving in and there's no discussion, then neither is my departure." She smirked like I was bluffing. I was not. I did not yell. I did not insult her. I did not even argue. I asked one more question. "When is he moving in?" "Friday," she said. It was Tuesday. She had already told him yes. She had apparently also told him I would understand because I was reasonable. Reasonable. That word again. Sometimes reasonable is just another word for easy to override. I told her, "Okay. If he's moving in Friday, I'll be out by Thursday night." She laughed and said I was being dramatic. "No," I said. "I'm being consistent. You said there's no discussion. I agree." She went right back to her laptop. That was the part that stayed with me. No concern, no pause, no wait, are we really doing this? She truly believed I would sulk, complain, and then adapt. The next morning, I called the leasing office before I even got to work. I asked what the process was for removing myself from a joint lease. The property manager explained that both tenants would need to sign a release, and the remaining tenant would need to qualify on her own, or with a new approved co-signer or occupant. That was useful information. I did not mention Tara's plan yet. I just took notes, thanked her, and hung up. Then I rented a small moving truck for Thursday evening, non-refundable. I also texted a friend of mine and asked if I could crash in his spare room for a few weeks while I found a place. He said yes right away. By Wednesday night, I had already boxed up most of my things from the spare room. Funny how fast a room stops feeling shared once you know someone else has claimed it without your permission. Tara noticed the boxes and asked what I was doing. I said, "Exactly what I told you I'd do." She stared at me for a second, then scoffed. "You're really leaving over this?" I said, "No, I'm leaving because you told me I don't get a say in where I live." She immediately tried to flip it. "So you're punishing me for helping someone." That was her favorite move. Turn the boundary into a character flaw, make the person protecting themselves sound cruel. I told her if she wanted to help Ryan, that was her decision. But I was not sharing an apartment with her ex. She called me insecure. Maybe. But insecure is still better than trapped in a bad arrangement I never agreed to. By Thursday afternoon, she seemed more annoyed than worried. I honestly think she still believed I would cool off. Then at 6 o'clock the truck pulled up outside and the whole tone changed. She was standing by the window when she saw it. "You actually rented a truck?" "Yes." "For what?" "To move my life." She followed me downstairs, still talking like this was some weird little protest that would end in 10 minutes. The driver handed me the keys. I signed the paperwork and started loading boxes. That was when she changed tactics. "Daniel, stop. This is insane. He's just staying in the spare room." I did not answer right away. I carried my desk chair down the stairs instead. Then she said the line that probably mattered most to her. "You're embarrassing me." Not "you're hurting me," not "I don't want you to go." Embarrassing. That told me she had already sold Ryan a version of this story where I was calm, supportive, and maybe even a little noble about it. She had likely told him the whole thing was handled. Reality had arrived in a rental truck. While I kept loading things, I could hear her inside on the phone with Ryan, voice lowered but tense. By the third trip, she came back outside. "He doesn't have anywhere else to go," she said. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I told her, as calmly as I could, that I was not stopping her from helping him. I was simply removing myself from a living situation I did not agree to. She crossed her arms and said, "You're overreacting. It's just temporary." "Temporary doesn't mean optional for me," I said. Then I reminded her that both our names were still on the lease and that an additional occupant would require landlord approval. Subleasing or moving someone in without written consent would violate the agreement. She froze for maybe half a second. "He won't care," she said quickly. "Maybe not," I said. "Maybe he will." I did not threaten her. I did not raise the stakes. I just stated facts. Facts are often enough when someone is used to bluffing through life. By 9 that night, my side of the apartment was gone. The couch, TV, bed frame, kitchen table, desk, cookware, half the living room, all mine, all loaded. The place looked different immediately. Smaller. Harsher. Less like a home and more like an unfinished idea. Tara stood in the middle of the room and said, "So what, you're just abandoning me?" I said, "No, I'm stepping aside like you asked." She hated that phrasing, I could tell. As I drove away, she sent one text, "You'll regret this." I did not answer. The next morning, I woke up on my friend's couch to 12 missed calls, all from Tara. I ignored them and called the leasing office again. This time, I was more direct. I said I was vacating the apartment and wanted to begin the formal process of removing myself from the lease. Then I asked, hypothetically, what would happen if another occupant moved in without written approval? The property manager did not hesitate. That would be a violation. Interesting. About 10 minutes later, Tara finally switched from calling to texting. "Ryan's here. We need to talk about the lease." Then another. "The landlord says we both have to sign something." Then another. "Why would you call them without telling me?" That one made me pause, not because I felt guilty, because it confirmed something. She truly believed she was allowed to make a major housing decision without telling me, but I was somehow wrong for protecting myself without telling her first. That is not partnership. That is ownership with nicer language. That afternoon, I sent one clean message. I'm removing myself from the lease. I won't be financially responsible for a third occupant I didn't agree to. I'll sign the release once you qualify solo or add him legally. Then I blocked her, her phone, her social media, everything, not out of rage, out of clarity. An hour later, Ryan tried calling from an unknown number. Blocked. Then a different number. Blocked again. I had no interest in joining some emergency group discussion about boundaries that should never have been crossed in the first place. By Saturday morning, the updates were coming through mutual friends whether I asked for them or not. Ryan did not qualify on his own. His credit was weak. Tara, on her income alone, did not meet the building's ratio without a co-signer, which meant the landlord had given them two choices: submit proper, updated paperwork or risk lease termination. Reality is a quiet thing. It does not argue. It just shows you the terms. A mutual friend passed along a message from Tara saying I was sabotaging her, being petty, and proving I was not a real partner because I ran at the first sign of discomfort. I asked that friend to send back one sentence: real partners don't move their ex in without discussion. After that, I stopped engaging completely. By Monday, Ryan had officially moved in anyway. Mattress on the floor in the spare room, 2 duffel bags, big energy about fresh starts. From what I heard, he walked in expecting a soft landing. Instead, he walked into a leasing compliance email demanding updated occupant documentation within 72 hours. Tara tried telling him it was just paperwork, but paperwork has a way of making things real. It asks for names, income, credit, signatures. It does not care how evolved everyone claims to be. Ryan did not love that. He had apparently pictured himself crashing there for a bit, not attaching himself to a year-long financial obligation under a joint lease. Their first serious argument happened within 48 hours. That did not surprise me at all. Crisis compassion sounds romantic until the application fee hits and somebody needs to submit bank statements. By midweek, the property manager emailed me directly to say Tara had submitted the documents to remove me from the lease and keep the unit with an additional applicant pending approval. I signed the release that same day. No delay, no leverage, no speech. That shocked Tara more than anything, from what I heard. She had expected me to stall or use the paperwork to force contact. Instead, I did exactly what I said I would do. I stepped aside. But there was one thing she had not thought through. Once I was off the lease, the security deposit issue shifted. Half of that deposit was legally mine, and the landlord was not going to just reassign it automatically because she wanted a new arrangement. If she wanted to keep the unit, she needed to replace my portion. Ryan, unsurprisingly, did not jump in to cover it. By Thursday, they were arguing about money. That was the first real sign that the fantasy had worn off. Non-negotiable decisions always sound powerful right up until the invoice shows up. Meanwhile, I signed a 6-month lease on a small studio across town. It was nothing special. Quiet building, older appliances, good enough light in the mornings, and best of all, no tension waiting behind the front door. Tara, according to the grapevine, started telling people I ran. I did not run. I refused to stay. There is a difference, and people who rely on pressure hate that difference because it means you are no longer playing their part in the script. The second week brought more updates. Ryan got approved only conditionally. Tara had to agree to a higher security deposit and a stricter lease addendum about timely rent. If rent was late even once, the landlord could start termination steps much faster. That is a lot of pressure for a temporary act of kindness. The first rent cycle came around quickly. Tara had always been fine when we split rent, predictable income, automatic transfers, clean math. Ryan was less clean, freelance design work, pending invoices, vague promises. The usual language people use when money is never quite where it needs to be. Tara started complaining to mutual friends that I had put her in a difficult spot, that I could have given her more time. More time for what exactly? More time to get used to being ignored in my own home. Around 3 weeks after I moved out, I got an unexpected call from the landlord. He asked if I had fully vacated the premises and removed all my belongings. I said yes. He said good because there had been noise complaints and he wanted to confirm I was no longer an occupant. Noise complaints. Interesting. Apparently Ryan had started having people over. Late nights, balcony smoking, music. The building had always been strict about that. Tara used to complain when upstairs neighbors made noise after 10. Now she was the one collecting warnings. Then the rent came in 2 days late. Under the new addendum, 2 days was enough to trigger formal notice. Tara, I heard, said the landlord was being unfair. She also said I had set her up for failure. That part almost made me laugh. I had not done anything except remove myself from a decision I did not make. By the end of the month, Ryan was already talking about needing space. Said living together was showing compatibility issues. That phrase got back to me through a mutual friend, and I remember just sitting in my studio, drinking coffee, thinking of course it is. They were not building anything. They were improvising inside a problem. By month 2, everything had become very predictable. Tara's social media shifted first. Less polished confidence, more vague quotes about resilience and growth through hard transitions. Ryan's freelance money remained inconsistent. Tara started covering more of the rent. Then she started pushing him about structure, job leads, timelines, and responsibility. He did not like that, which was almost funny considering she had called me dramatic for objecting to his arrival. Suddenly, she was the one asking hard questions inside a shared space, and suddenly he did not find that charming. The landlord tightened things further after the second late rent issue. Automatic payments, no more vague promises, no more I'll send it tomorrow. Ryan apparently took that as insulting, said he felt like he was being treated like a liability. He was. By then, I had settled into a rhythm in my studio, quiet mornings, clean counters, no surprise debates. No ex-boyfriend energy drifting around my kitchen. I had not realized how tense I had become in that old apartment until I no longer lived there. About 9 weeks after I left, I ran into Tara downtown by accident. She looked tired, not falling apart, just stretched thin in that very specific way people do when reality has been arguing with them for weeks. She looked at me and said, "So, are you happy now?" That question told me everything. She still thought this had been about winning. I said, "I wasn't trying to win anything. I just refused to live in a situation I didn't agree to." She said, "Ryan and I are working through things." I just nodded. I did not ask what that meant. I did not need details. The lesson was never really about Ryan. It was about what happens when someone says there is no discussion in a shared life. Real life responds with its own non-negotiables, and they come with due dates. 3 months after I left, the whole thing tipped over, not in some dramatic explosion, just the way these things usually do. One missed payment too many. One lease review, too many warnings, too much pressure on a setup that was never stable to begin with. The landlord scheduled a compliance meeting after rent came in 5 days late. From what I heard, Tara went alone because Ryan had a client call. That detail said plenty. She was given 2 choices. Bring the account fully current and commit to 0 further violations, or begin voluntary termination before the situation moved closer to eviction. Voluntary termination sounds polite. It is not. It is just the clean version of being told your arrangement is no longer working. Ryan did not handle that well. He said she should never have added him legally. She said he should have stepped up. They were both technically right, which usually means the whole situation was wrong from the start. By the end of that week, they were over again. Ryan went back to couch surfing. Tara moved out. Part of the deposit was forfeited. The apartment that had been declared non-negotiable was gone. I did not celebrate. I did not feel triumphant. I felt confirmed. When someone uses control instead of agreement, they are not creating stability. They are just speeding up the consequences. Around that same time, I met someone new. Maya. She worked in healthcare administration and lived across the hall from my studio. We first talked because of a misdelivered package. Then coffee. Then more. What stood out about her was not chemistry, at least not at first. It was tone. Nothing felt like a power struggle, no little tests, no smirks, no performance, just normal adult conversation. A few weeks in, she asked what had happened in my last relationship. I did not dramatize it. I just said my ex made a major living decision without discussion, so I removed myself. Maya nodded and said, "That makes sense." That simple reaction felt almost foreign. Later, she mentioned that her own ex had recently reached out asking to get coffee. Then she said, matter of fact, I told him no. It didn't feel respectful to where I am now. No lecture. No speech about maturity. No performance about how evolved she was. Just a boundary. I did not realize how much tension I had been carrying until I started spending time with someone who did not confuse respect with control. 6 months after I loaded my life into that truck, everything had settled. Maya and I took things slowly. When my studio lease came up for renewal, she asked, "What are you thinking?" That was it. A question. We sat at her kitchen table and talked for 45 minutes about budget, commute, privacy, expectations, and finances. No eye rolls, no declarations, no one trying to win. We eventually signed a place together. Bigger, neutral ground, both names on the lease, clear terms, simple adult stuff. And that, more than anything, showed me how bad the old dynamic had become. Healthy choices are often quiet. They do not need force. The last thing I ever heard directly from Tara came months later in a LinkedIn message request. Just one sentence. "I miscalculated. I thought you'd stay." I did not respond, because that really was the whole story in one line. She thought I would stay. She thought I would argue, adapt, tolerate, negotiate, and eventually accept a situation I never agreed to. She thought non-negotiable only worked in one direction. It doesn't. Sometimes the strongest response is not louder control, it is quiet exit. Signed forms, returned keys, a truck loaded while someone watches from the window and still thinks you are bluffing. I was not bluffing. And in the end, the only thing that was truly non-negotiable was reality. Rent gets due, leases get enforced, people either qualify or they do not. And when someone tells you there is no discussion in a shared life, sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is remove yourself from the room entirely. There are a few lessons I took from all of this. Lesson 1. If someone makes a major shared life decision without you, the problem is not the decision alone. The problem is that they no longer see you as an equal voice. Lesson 2. Helping another person does not require sacrificing your own boundaries. You can respect someone's choice without participating in it. Lesson 3. Control looks powerful right up until paperwork, deadlines, and money get involved. Real life does not care who sounded most confident. Lesson 4. Leaving is not always running. Sometimes leaving is the clearest form of self-respect. Lesson 5. The right relationship does not make agreement feel like a battle. It makes it feel normal. What would you have done if your partner told you their ex was moving in and there was no discussion? And do you think Daniel made the right move by leaving immediately, or would you have handled it differently?